I'm cutting ties with a broke 60-year-old. From now on, consider us strangers. Don't count on me. My son-in-law looked down on me and said those words. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The future I had imagined when my only daughter got married was shattered in that moment. My name is Scarlett, and I'm 59 years old. My husband named David passed away suddenly in an accident just as he was about to retire at 60, 6 years ago. Now, I live in a single-story house that David built, with my 25-year-old daughter, Ruby. It's a small house with a 100-square-foot living room and two 80-square-foot bedrooms, but it was spacious enough for the three of us. Now that it's just the two of us, it feels a bit lonely. We have a small yard, but Ruby uses it as her parking space. Ruby, who got her certification from beauty school and works as a nail technician, just fulfilled her dream of opening her own shop last year. I'm forever grateful to David, who provided for us and supported her dreams. Growing up in a poor family, I decided to drop out of school and work to support my three younger siblings. Luckily, I got a live-in job at a local hotel. I started as a helper, learned the ropes, and worked as an employee. When I was 25, I was introduced to David, a regular customer's son who was 8 years older than me. I was immediately drawn to his kind and sincere nature, and we got married. David worked at a steel mill and had an irregular schedule with night shifts, so after our marriage, I quit my hotel job and became a homemaker. I developed an interest in cooking while preparing daily meals, and with David's support, I went to school and got a chef's license. I was happy to do anything to support him. When Ruby was born and childcare settled down, I started a blog, posting homemade meals and packed lunches. I also jumped on the Instagram trend and continue it as a hobby. Now, 5 years have been passed since David had passed away. I'm excitedly working on a plan before turning 60. One day, Ruby asked me to meet her boyfriend, so we made plans for dinner. When I arrived at the restaurant with her, a good physique man in a crisp suit was waiting. Nice to meet you. I'm Christopher and I'm dating Ruby. Christopher is a real estate agent at his father's company. He helped Ruby when she was looking for her shop. They told me they were thinking of getting married soon. Seeing how kind and considerate he was to Ruby and how happy she looked, I was genuinely happy for my daughter's upcoming marriage. Please take good care of Ruby. Later, during a family meeting, they decided to get their marriage certificate first and have the wedding next year due to preparations. Time flew by, and Ruby married Christopher and moved to their new condo. With Ruby gone, the house filled with memories of our family of three felt a bit lonely. I'm glad I've been preparing for turning 60. Please look forward to it. I whispered to David's photo and prayed. Just then, my phone rang. Hello, Mom? How are you doing? Hearing Ruby's cheerful voice, I couldn't help but smile. Oh, I'm doing well. It sounds like you're doing great too. Your 60th birthday is coming up, right? Let's have dinner together to celebrate. Christopher has reserved a wonderful place for us. Really? I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. After hanging up, I turned to David's photo, prayed, and spoke to him in my heart. I'm so blessed to have our daughter and her husband celebrate my birthday. It wasn't that I was alone after Ruby got married. I gained another family member in Christopher. I daydreamed about the day I'd be called Grandma when they have children. On my birthday, Rudy led me to a restaurant. It was a famous upscale French restaurant I recognized. In a private room, Christopher, who had arrived earlier, was waiting. Happy 60th birthday, Scarlett. Thank you. Celebrating here is truly special. Seeing my teary eyes, Ruby gave a warm smile. Happy birthday, Mom. I'm sure Dad would be thrilled too. We enjoyed a delicious full-course meal, and at the end, a dessert plate decorated with Happy 60th was served. Ruby even gifted me a red branded pouch for my birthday. Christopher, Ruby, thank you so much for today. The two offered to drive me home. I wanted to give them a small token of appreciation, so I asked them to stop by my house. I was worried if Christopher's large car would fit in my small yard, but it did. The sight made Ruby and me laugh. Perhaps because it was his first time here, Christopher looked around the house uneasily and became silent. I made these sweets. I hope you like them. I served them tea and the treats I had made the day before. Yummy! Mom's treats are always the best. Try some, Christopher. While Ruby enjoyed the sweets, he remained silent, taking a bite without a word. I was a bit concerned about his behavior, but Ruby chatted away. Then, Christopher suddenly asked about David's background and mine. He worked at a steel company from right after high school until he was 60. He was a hardworking and sincere man. I dropped out of school and worked at a hotel, but after getting married, I became a homemaker. I got really into cooking and started posting my dishes and sweets on a blog and Instagram. Have you always lived in this house? Yes, he built it for us before Ruby was born. We had trouble conceiving, and he told me that no matter what, this would always be our home. I see. Christopher seemed deep in thought as he listened. I'll come over next time to taste your home-cooked meals. Of course, you're always welcome. I waved goodbye as they left. As I started cleaning up, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Christopher standing alone. Oh, did you forget something? Christopher stepped in, looking down at me with a stern gaze. There's something I forgot to tell you. What is it? I was completely fooled because we always met outside. Fooled. I had no idea what he was talking about. I never imagined you lived in such a small house, struggling financially. Ruby has her own shop and car, and you always look well kept, so I never suspected. I was surprised you served cheap homemade treats when you invited me over. I tried to recall his odd behavior since he entered the house. If that's how you entertain guests, we could have just gone to a diner instead of an upscale restaurant today. It would have suited your taste better. I'm sorry I tried to match your level without knowing you were poor. You haven't heard anything from Ruby? Ignoring my words, he continued with a tone and attitude that seemed like a completely different person. I need to be selective about who I associate with as the next CEO. Having a relative who dropped out and lives off a pension without working is nothing short of embarrassing. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Just so you know, now that you're 60, consider our ties severed. From now on, we're strangers, so don't rely on us. He looked down on me with those final words and quickly left. What just happened? His shocking words kept replaying in my mind. I collapsed in front of David's photo. What should I do? The son-in-law I thought was a kind and caring young man showed his true, discriminatory nature. It felt like I had been thrown from heaven to hell. That night, I couldn't sleep, debating whether to tell Ruby about our conversation. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to tell her, hoping she'd be treated well. A month later, I moved into my new home. It's a single-story house with 4 bedrooms, a large yard, and parking for 4 cars, built on a plot equivalent to 4 lots. Even for someone like me who doesn't drive, it's conveniently located near a train station and bus stop, with grocery stores and drugstores within walking distance. Yes, the plan I was excitedly working on for my 60th birthday was to fulfill the dream David and I had for our retirement. I wanted to live in a single-story house with a guest room for when my daughter and her family visit, watch my grandchildren play in the large yard, and spend peaceful days with him. Sitting in front of David's photo, which overlooks the garden, I whispered to myself, I wanted to fulfill your dream. Will I end up alone? Though Ruby, unaware of everything, kept in touch, the situation with Christopher remained unchanged. The excitement of preparing for the move felt like a distant memory. Once I settled into my new home, Ruby suddenly contacted me, asking to stay the night. Seeing her enter the house with large bags, I had an idea of what happened but asked, "What's going on?" She explained that Christopher's attitude changed the day after my 60th birthday celebration, and he began to belittle her. He's been out drinking almost every night and coming home late. Just the other day, I found out he's been cheating. It seems that in Christopher's eyes, Ruby had become nothing more than the daughter of a poor family, despite my hopes that he would cherish her. A few days later, Christopher visited our old house, found it empty, and contacted Ruby to ask where we were. She hesitated, glancing at me, but I nodded, signaling her to give him our new address. As soon as he entered our house, he confronted Ruby. "Whose house is this? Have you been cheating on me too?" "This is my house." Seeing me standing behind her, he looked momentarily surprised. We couldn't just stand and chat, so I led them to the living room and served tea. And high-end chocolates, not homemade treats. Seeing the chocolates, Christopher scoffed. "Trying to show off when you're poor will only make your life harder. You must have stretched your budget thin to afford this house." Wasn't he here to apologize to Ruby? As I remained silent, Ruby, usually calm and cheerful, glared at him. "Stop making assumptions about my mother when you know nothing about her. I know she lived in a shabby, cramped house until recently. Your dad worked in a factory and probably didn't earn much. And she, a dropout, just played around making food, right?" It seemed he looked down on us, even in front of Ruby. She began to explain calmly. "My mother started cooking to support my father. Her blog, where she posted her recipes, became popular, leading her to publish several books and even supervise kitchenware production. She's a renowned culinary expert with various certifications." He looked at me, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Mom never showed her face in the media to ensure our family's privacy. Still, even after retiring from her culinary career, she has tens of thousands of followers on her hobbyist social media. To think you called her cooking just a hobby. Well, she just got lucky and became a topic of discussion. After all, she's just an ordinary person with a husband who had a low-paying factory job." I couldn't let his last comment slide. "I don't care what you say about me, but I won't let you insult my husband who worked hard for our family. He worked at a major steel factory and became a factory manager in his 40s. His annual salary exceeded $100,000, and we lived comfortably." $100,000. He looked back and forth between Ruby and me, disbelief evident on his face. Ruby nonchalantly sipped her tea. "I was told by my husband to spend my earnings however I wanted, but I saved everything. After he passed away shortly after retiring, his untouched retirement funds and even the insurance payout were left." "Why did you live in that old house for so long then?" He seemed genuinely puzzled. "That house was a special place he built for me. It's filled with memories and sentiments that money can't buy." Ruby, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "My parents never splurged on themselves. But they made sure I had a variety of experiences. They covered my tuition, extracurricular activities, and even taught me table manners during our annual trips and restaurant visits." "You mean like at a diner, right?" Ruby, clearly annoyed by his condescending tone, let out an exaggerated sigh. "Actually, the restaurant we celebrated my mom's 60th birthday at is the same place where the three of us dined for my dad's 60th. That's the kind of restaurant I'm talking about." The reason I almost cried when we went to that restaurant was because Ruby chose a place filled with memories with David. "But you were looking for a cheap rental for your nail salon, right?" "Yes, because the nail salon is my dream. I wanted to achieve it on my own, without relying on my parents. That's all there is to it. The only luxury I had was the car my dad bought me as a graduation gift." Christopher, who thought he knew everything, instead of apologizing, accused Ruby as she finished her tea. "Why did you hide such important information?" "Why does my parents' wealth have anything to do with marrying me? I knew my mom never bragged, so I showed you her social media. You would have seen she's a renowned chef. I didn't hide anything." Christopher was at a loss for words, glancing at me for support, but I pretended not to notice. Then, he suddenly changed his tone and started making excuses. "I have a responsibility to choose who I date as the next CEO. How can I introduce someone from a poor background as my family? If you had told me everything from the start, I wouldn't have misunderstood or cheated. Ruby, I promise I won't cheat again. Please come back." Ruby chuckled. "That's funny. You are the one who cut ties with my mom." At her words, Christopher and I both looked at her in shock. Why would I go back to someone who looked down on our family, cut ties with my mom, and even cheated? "No." Scarlett, I apologize for my misunderstanding. The sight of him, who had been so arrogant just moments ago, now expressing his apology was comical. I calmly told him, "You did cut ties with me. Remember telling me we're strangers now and not to rely on you? Don't worry, I have no intention of being your mother-in-law again." No way! He looked defeated, but I couldn't find the words to comfort him. Please leave for today. Tell your parents the truth and get their approval for the divorce. With no room for argument against Ruby's firm stance, Christopher left. Mom, I'm so sorry for all the pain I caused. It's all because I married him. Ruby, tears in her eyes, held my hand. I gently grasped her hand. Don't worry about it. I'm so glad you're my daughter. Ruby had overheard our conversation that day. She knew I was keeping silent about cutting ties with Christopher for her sake. Seeing his attitude, she decided on a divorce and left the house. A few days later, his parents came to apologize with him in tow. Ruby and I knew it wasn't their fault, so we declined any compensation in the divorce proceedings and quickly finalized the divorce. Fortunately, we hadn't announced the wedding to our acquaintances since it was planned for a later date. I'm home. Hello, good to see you again. A year has passed since then, and Ruby brought home a man she recently started dating. Well, it's been a while. Dinner's just ready, come on in. The man was Nicholas, Ruby's childhood friend whom I knew well. He had always been close to Ruby without any prejudice. When Ruby got divorced, he was there to listen and support her. Their unchanged bond and mutual trust warmed my heart. I sincerely hope for Ruby's happiness and want to watch over her from a distance.
I married the man I deeply love, and finally we became a married couple that I've always dreamt of. And to top it all, we're even holding a wedding ceremony that I've always dreamt of. Being blessed by so many people and being able to marry the one I love. I was sure my parents in heaven would also be happy. That's what I thought. But I had no idea about the tragedy that was awaiting me. I will never forgive them for ruining everything. I am going to get back at them. My name is Mary. I got proposed to by Thomas, my boyfriend who's 2 years older, and got married at the age of 27. I lost my father when I was very young, and my mother passed away due to illness 2 years ago. Thomas was the one who supported me both physically and emotionally when I was at my lowest. We got married on the anniversary of our 2.5 years of dating and started a blissful newlywed life. Due to my husband's busy work schedule, we decided to have the wedding ceremony when things calmed down. On my husband's days off, we went to the wedding venue and started preparing for our wedding. We had the date of our ceremony fixed, and it was time to decide on our guests. I have an aunt and uncle who loved me like their real daughter in place of my deceased parents. After my father's death, they brought me lots of cooked meals since my mother was busy working all the time. They also kept me company when my mother was at work, so I wouldn't feel lonely. Moreover, when my mother fell sick, they shared all her chores so that I wouldn't have to carry the burden all by myself. Even when my mother's condition didn't improve and I was down, it's okay. Your mother is definitely going to get better, so Mary, you also believe and wait for her, okay? My aunt would encourage me gently. No matter how tough or painful things got, I was able to overcome them because I had my aunt and my uncle by my side. That's why I wanted them to sit in the seats designated for family on the bride's side. To convey this, I visited my aunt and uncle's house after a long time. Mary, congratulations on your marriage. My aunt greeted me with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Auntie. So I was thinking, I want you guys to sit in the seats designated for families at my wedding. Is that okay? Of course. Then my aunt brought out a big box. Mary, why don't you open it? Prompted by my aunt, I opened the box in front of me. Inside was a pure white wedding dress. The dress, made of beautiful silk fabric, had a good balance of elegance and cuteness. The décolletage was decorated with vibrant lace. The silhouette was cleverly designed to form a beautiful A-line, and cute flower embroideries were done on the hem. The size was smaller than usual, and it was clear that it was made just for me. I loved the wedding dress at first sight. Huh? Why this? Well, your mother, my sister, she made it. What? Mom did? That wedding dress was handmade by my mother. Despite battling illness, she tirelessly stitched it together day after day, custom fit for my petite frame. She asked my aunt, "If Mary ever gets married, please give her this. This is a creation filled with all the love your mother could muster in her final days. Mary dear, you must wear this dress at your wedding. Your mother would be so pleased," said my aunt, her eyes brimming with tears and a tender smile on her face. Her heartfelt sentiment moved me to tears. "Thank you, Auntie. You've kept it safe all this time. I promise I'll wear this dress at my wedding. You have to come and see me wear it," I said, clutching my mother's handcrafted wedding dress, full of happiness as I returned home. Once home, I hung the dress on my bedroom wall and gazed at it intently. I was determined to make my wedding a success wearing this dress in honor of my mother. That feeling only got stronger as the days passed. Then one day, a disaster struck. When I returned home from work, the wedding dress that should have been hanging on my wall was gone. What? It's gone? Why? I know I left it hanging right here. Panicking, I pulled out my phone to call the cops. Just then, my husband walked in the door. "Oh, Mary, what's wrong?" Seeing me in tears, he sensed something was amiss. He rushed over to me. My dress is gone. I had it hanging right here. I think someone stole it." My desperate plea elicited an unexpected reaction from my husband. "Oh, is that all?" "Huh? What do you mean? Thomas, do you know something?" I asked hesitantly, to which my husband responded with a shocking revelation. "Of course I know. My sister said she's getting married soon and wanted to borrow your dress." "Huh?" Yes, my husband just went ahead and lent my wedding dress to his sister without even asking me. Apparently, when he casually mentioned the dress to her, she asked if she could borrow it, and he readily agreed. That's why she came over to pick it up. She used the spare key from our mailbox. He gave my dress to his sister without my permission. I can't believe this. What the hell? As I raged at my husband, he waved his hands dismissively as if it were no big deal. Our wedding is still a while away, so it's not a problem, right? Besides, my sister was thrilled. She's broke and was happy that she wouldn't have to pay for a dress. Happy that she wouldn't have to pay for a dress. I never gave permission for any of this. I was livid at my husband's blatant disregard for my feelings. That dress was handmade by my mother specifically for me. Didn't I tell you that, Thomas? It's tailored perfectly to my size. Why would you lend it out without asking me first? Calm down. It's not like it's a one-time use thing. You can still wear it, so what's the issue? What's the issue? It's obvious, isn't it? Why would your sister wear my dress before I do? No matter how you look at it, that's just wrong. Even after I explained why I was pissed, my husband refused to apologize or even acknowledge his mistake. To add insult to injury, he let out an exasperated sigh. "Mary, you're being too petty. Stop acting like a spoiled child, okay?" Spoiled? Being upset about this makes me spoiled? It's something my mother made for me, so it makes no sense for my sister-in-law to be wearing it before me. I'd reached my limits with his irresponsible comments that disregarded my feelings completely. "I'm going to your parents' house tomorrow to get the wedding dress back from your sister." "Huh? Tomorrow is the day my sister's fiancé and his parents are coming to visit our parents' house. Don't interrupt them." Interrupt? You got some nerve. Let me be clear. No matter what anyone says, I have no intention of letting your sister wear that dress. The next day, I took a day off of work to go see my sister-in-law. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, I could hear lively voices from the open front door. As I secretly stepped in and listened, Wow, you made this dress yourself? That's amazing, Cynthia. A man's voice, whom I did not know, echoed in the house. Cynthia was my sister-in-law. Cynthia, who was praised, responded in a humble tone. Oh, it's nothing like that. She was flaunting my mother's handcrafted wedding dress to her fiancé and his parents. It took me quite some time, but I really wanted to bring my dream dress to life and have a good wedding, so I ended up making it myself. At that moment, something inside me crumbled with a sound. Her dream dress? What a joke. That's something my mother made with love, just for me. Before I even realized I was already walking towards them, I walked straight through the entrance and seized the wedding dress from my sister-in-law. Then I shouted, "This is mine!" in front of everyone. Everyone present looked at me with surprised expressions. Whoa, Mary, what's happening all of a sudden? My father-in-law asked me in a flustered manner. Ignoring him, I stared sternly at my sister-in-law and revealed the truth to everyone. This dress is something my mother made for me. Your daughter stole it from my room without my permission. What? What? Everyone present was taken aback, their eyes wide with shock, except for my sister-in-law, who turned pale. Hey, Cynthia, don't tell me that's true. As she was questioned by her fiancé, my sister-in-law desperately tried to resist. No, it's not like that. This is really something I made by myself. Realizing that the talk was going nowhere, I decided to question Cynthia. Why don't you try it on then? Since my mother made it to fit my size, I don't think it will fit you. Yes, my sister-in-law is taller and more toned than I am. There's no way she could pull off this dress, which was made to fit my petite frame. Hey, what are you doing? Finally, my husband appeared. My sister-in-law must have called him. His face was beet red with anger. Mary, what the heck are you doing? Are you trying to ruin my sister's wedding? What are you talking about? If anything, I'm the one who's about to have their wedding ruined. I retorted to my husband, and yet again, he started to blurt out something outrageous. Shut up. We canceled our wedding. So give that dress to my sister. Huh? Canceled? That's right. We canceled it. My husband insisted, pressing his point. My sister said she was strapped for cash, so we gave her the $50K we saved for our wedding as a gift. Since we aren't holding the wedding anymore, we don't need that dress, right? You let someone borrow my dress without asking, then canceled our wedding and also gave away the $50K we saved up. Are you out of your mind? So to him, our marriage was just something of that little importance. I could feel myself falling out of love with my husband. As I fell silent, my husband, misunderstanding that he'd won the argument, opened his mouth again. Now you give that dress back to my sister right away. You have no objections about the cancellation, do you? Fine. Let's get a divorce then. Huh? At my immediate reply, my husband let out a dumbfounded voice. Did you hear me? I said divorce. I don't want to be with someone like you who can trample on people's feelings without a second thought. Hey, wait a minute. Why do we have to get a divorce? That's ridiculous, isn't it? My husband started panicking, flustered. Any sane person would have seen this coming. He's just insane. Well, that settles it. As I tried to leave the place, holding the dress. Hold on a minute. My sister-in-law grabbed the end of the dress with all her might. The dress tore in the process, becoming a pitiful sight. Looking at it, my sister-in-law and husband burst out laughing as if they couldn't contain themselves. Serves you right. This is what happens when you mess with my sister. Yeah, really. If you just quietly lent me the dress, none of this would have happened. You brought this upon yourself, Mary. Tears welled up in my eyes, mixed with anger. My wedding being canceled was fine, but I wanted to keep this dress safe with me for my entire life. And now, because of these worthless people, just then, my sister-in-law's fiancé stood up and slowly muttered, "Guess we're done too." Huh? Everyone was taken aback. Wait, you're joking, right? You're calling off our engagement? Why? In response to my sister-in-law's plea, her fiancé glared at her with a fierce look. Why? It's obvious, isn't it? There's no way I could marry someone who can do nasty things like this with no hesitation. No way. Even his parents seemed to feel the same way, showing quiet anger towards my sister-in-law's actions. Well, no more talk of marriage then. My fiancé and his parents were about to leave. Just then, my sister-in-law burst in frantically, yelling, "Wait a minute. It's absurd to call off the engagement over something like this. Right, Mom and Dad? You guys think so too, don't you?" Despite her pleas to her parents, it was too late. Wait, Dad? Mom, why are you glaring at me? Her father then shouted at her with full force, "Get out, you disgrace." Even my usual strong-willed sister-in-law started sobbing due to this overwhelming force. "You guys are so cruel. This is too much." "Stop crying. I don't remember raising a jackass like you. I'm not claiming you, someone who can be this dismissive of others' feelings, as our daughter. But, upon seeing his sister crumbling in tears, my husband stepped in to intervene. "Dad, Mom, calm down. You don't have to blame my sister this much. You too, Thomas." "What? You're no better. How dare you disregard Mary's feelings? Leave this house with Cynthia, you foolish son." Probably never anticipating that he too would be disowned, my husband stood there, mouth agape. Then my mother-in-law came over to me, bowing her head in apology. "I'm so sorry, Mary. We were told that the dress was handmade by our daughter, and we just believed it. No, it's okay, but I can't continue living with Thomas anymore." "That's okay. It's our daughter's fault. You go ahead and live your life without worrying about it." Her words really hit home. My in-laws had always been very kind to me, so I felt a pang of guilt that things have come down to this. But I couldn't stay with Thomas anymore. "Mary, I'm sorry, I really am. We'll have a proper wedding, just don't file for divorce yet." My husband quickly changed his tune the moment he was disowned by his parents. There was absolutely no chance of me getting back together with such a spineless man. "I will live my own life. I can live a happy life without you." Hearing this, my husband collapsed to his knees. After expressing my gratitude to my in-laws, I left their house. I packed my bags and headed to my aunt's house, where she was greatly surprised. However, in the end, she respected my feelings and welcomed me. As for that torn dress, my aunt mended the torn parts, and my mother's dress regained its shine. Afterward, I asked for alimony from my ex-husband, and we divorced. He had been secretly handing the wedding funds to my sister-in-law, so I was able to get a little more alimony. It seems that my husband and sister-in-law have been disowned by their parents, and now they are living together in the house we once shared. My sister-in-law, who had intended to become a housewife after marriage, had already quit her job and was now unemployed. Now my husband was single-handedly covering both of their living expenses. Next time, if I ever get another opportunity to marry someone, I want to make sure to thoroughly assess my partner, and then I will have a wonderful wedding. Of course, wearing my mother's handmade wedding dress.
My name is Emily, and I work as a corporate employee. Living with me is my husband of the same age, Michael, and our 5-year-old son, Ethan. Michael and I met at a group date organized by a friend. Impressed by his straightforward character and persistent courtship, I felt safe and decided to marry him. In our early days of marriage, Michael was proactive with household chores, and I felt deeply cared for. I sincerely believed marrying Michael was the right choice. However, the days of bliss were to crumble sooner than expected. 2 years into our marriage, we were blessed with a new life. Michael shared in my joy, and I was convinced our happiness would only multiply from there. But reality had a different script. As my belly grew, I noticed a cold shift in Michael's attitude. I didn't push the issue, thinking he might be feeling the pressure of impending fatherhood. I thought his perspective would change once he saw our child. Yet, when Ethan was born, Michael's attitude changed further, and not for the better. Despite my exhausted state after childbirth, desperately trying to care for our newborn, he offered no help. His annoyance with Ethan's night cries led him to sleeping in another room more often than not. I took a year-long parental leave and returned to work, but without Michael's help, the daily grind of childcare and work was draining me. Worse, Michael's return home got increasingly later. Being a full-timer myself, I wanted to share house chores and childcare responsibilities with him. But Michael seldom came home early, shattering my hopes. I'm overwhelmed doing everything by myself. Can't you come home a bit earlier? I'm working long hours for Ethan's sake. If you're not happy, why not work shorter hours? No matter how much I talked, he disregarded my pleas, suggesting that I should work less. If we could live on Michael's income alone, the story would be different. But that's not enough. That's why I resumed work just a year later. He didn't seem to understand that if my earnings reduced, so would our family's overall income. Moreover, I was always unhappy about Michael coming home drunk. This is a part of my work, whining and dining with clients. Michael is self-employed. He actively participates in these drinking sessions as he has to establish relationships with clients on his own. Having never experienced self-employment, I questioned if these daily drinking sessions were really necessary. 5-year-old Ethan began to understand things a bit more and seemed frustrated by his father's frequent absences. Why doesn't Daddy ever eat with us? Even on his days off, he just sleeps. I tried to pacify Ethan's growing resentment towards Michael by saying, Daddy is working very hard for us outside. Let's support him. But no matter how I tried to soothe him, Ethan seemed unconvinced. Given Michael's daily routine, he rarely had time to play with Ethan, even on weekends as he often slept till noon. Instead, he would laze around in his room till evening and then head out for another drinking session. Ethan doesn't like it either. At least spend some time with him on your days off. I'm working, aren't I? You're too naggy. Whenever I brought up his frequent nights out, he would just lash out. Doing my best to keep Ethan calm, our daily lives were filled with our quiet dinners together. Then I found out I'd have to go on a business trip on Saturday. Knowing Michael, he'd likely complain if he had to spend the day alone with Ethan. So, with some apprehension, I told him about the trip. I have an overnight business trip next Saturday. I need you to spend the day with Ethan. Is that okay? To my surprise, Michael seemed pleased. Sure, I'll take the opportunity to visit my parents. His response was the opposite of what I had expected, and I was taken aback. Michael seemed happy as he called his parents. They just sent an email suggesting we all take a trip, so we'll go together. A trip would surely make Ethan happy. It felt like a good opportunity to make up for not spending enough time with him. Michael had agreed to look after Ethan, so I felt relieved about going on my trip. And then the weekend arrived. Early in the morning, I left the house for my business trip. Please give my regards to your parents. I know. Take care. Seeing Michael in such a good mood, I felt relieved. It was work, but it would also be a day to myself for the first time in a while. I was looking forward to spending my time off as I pleased. The destination for the business trip was about 2 hours away by train. Come to think of it, this is near Michael's parents' house. The familiar sight from the train window brought back memories. It's been a while since I last visited. I should drop by sometime. I remembered coming to the department store near the station with Ethan. He was only 3 at the time. After lunch, Ethan was fussing about wanting ice cream. He cried so much that I ended up buying it for him. In the end, he was so full that he could only take a small bite, and it brought a smile to my face. He probably asked for it because we rarely came to this place. I remember being startled by how loud he was crying. As I was reminiscing about Ethan and watching the department store, I heard a boy's voice. I want ice cream. But we just had lunch, didn't we? You can't eat any more. But I really want to eat it. The boy was saying the same thing Ethan used to say. When I looked in the direction of the voice, I saw a sight that left me stunned. Ethan? There was Ethan and my in-laws. For some reason, Michael wasn't there, but he said they were going on a trip? My heart started pounding. Maybe Michael was in the restroom. Maybe the trip had been canceled. My mind was racing with different thoughts, and I was in a complete panic. Not understanding what was happening, I decided to call Michael to confirm his whereabouts. Hello? Where are you now? Eh? We're at a hot spring with my parents. I see. Right, of course. Do your best on your business trip. Talk to you later. With that, he hung up. As I listened to the end of the call, I was left in utter disbelief. I had caught on to a big lie that Michael had spun. Convinced he was hiding something, I decided to dig into his actions in light of this incident. On Sunday evening, I made sure not to ask about how Michael and Ethan spent their day even after I came home. It was unnaturally quiet, Ethan not sharing anything about his weekend. Feeling a clear sense of unease, I resolved to gather evidence. The following day, Michael went to a social gathering after work as usual. He seemed heavily drunk that day, falling asleep on the living room couch as soon as he got home. Ugh, what a nuisance. I couldn't help but sigh at the sight of Michael, more inebriated than usual. Doing housework while looking at a drunken Michael was not a pleasant experience. After finishing all the chores, and just as I was about to leave Michael on the couch and head to bed, his mobile phone chimed. Seeing it as an opportunity, I peeked at his mobile phone to find a message on display. I gently picked it up, careful not to wake Michael. With a mix of anticipation and dread, I checked the screen. "Thanks for today. Can't wait to see you again." The moment I saw that message, my suspicions turned into conviction. Touching the screen of Michael's mobile phone, it opened easily. Recklessly, he had not set a lock on it. With trembling hands, I went through all the message history. The content was unbelievable. It made me feel dizzy. Michael was hiding something unthinkable. The next weekend, Michael said he was taking our son to his parents' house again. "You didn't get a break last week, right? This week you can relax by yourself." I knew what Michael was planning, but it wasn't time to reveal that yet. Pretending to be ignorant, I thanked Michael. "That sounds great. Maybe I'll relax at home and watch a movie." Even I found it amusing how poor my acting was as I pretended to be happy. Michael, oblivious to my act, seemed overtly relieved that I would be staying home. "Both of you, take care." After seeing them off at the front door, I made a call to a certain place. "Hi, I was hoping to request your services today. Is that okay? Thank you." The first step of my plan was successful. But I couldn't relax just yet. I had to move on to the next step immediately. I decided to discreetly follow them. With a cliched disguise and a hat I had bought just for this day worn low over my eyes, I watched from a distance. Just as expected, Michael left Ethan at his parents' house and went off somewhere else. Since I had already anticipated Michael's next moves, all I needed now was to gather the evidence. As my gaze shifted towards Ethan, I saw a lonely expression on his face. Seeing that face pained me. I couldn't stand letting Michael make Ethan feel this way without some sort of payback. I turned away from my in-laws' house and followed Michael to a cafe, his rendezvous point. "Oh, there you are. Sorry for the wait." A young woman arrived. Arm in arm, Michael and the woman disappeared into a nearby hotel. Without hesitation, I snap a picture. I never imagined I'd get such compelling evidence so easily. I felt deeply disappointed in Michael's foolish actions. After just a few minutes, I called Michael, figuring he just entered the room. "Hello? What are you up to?" "I'm at my parents' place. Why do you ask?" Michael responded, his voice obviously flustered. "I thought you could do some shopping on your way home." With my cheerful response, his voice brightened as if relieved. "Oh, is that all? Sure, I can do the shopping, but my parents asked me to stay the night. I thought I might." "Well, that's okay. I can do the shopping myself." Once again, Michael was planning to leave Ethan at his parents'. I felt a rush of anger, wondering whether he lacked awareness as a father. I worked hard to hide these emotions. I no longer had any feelings of love for Michael, who continued to lie. After hanging up the phone, I decided to pick up Ethan, who was likely feeling lonely. "Hello, I've come to pick up Ethan." Arriving at my in-laws' place, they seemed puzzled. "We thought Michael and you were both busy today. Is everything okay?" "I don't have any plans." They seemed even more confused when I responded. "Mom, you wouldn't believe this. Dad said he would play with me, but he left me alone. This is the second time. I hate Dad." Hearing my voice, Ethan ran up to me, his face a mix of anger and sadness. "I'm sorry, honey. Let's go home and play together." "Yay! Let me get my things!" After confirming Ethan had gone inside to collect his things, I revealed the truth to my in-laws. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Simply put, Michael is cheating. I saw him entering a hotel. When I showed them the pictures, their faces turned pale. "What? That guy?" "Michael has been going to a bar after work and is involved with a woman there. I've confirmed their message exchanges." "Mom, I'm ready to go." Ethan's arrival cut our conversation short. I'll send the details via email. I don't want to discuss this in front of Ethan. All right, we understand. Leaving them with that, I headed home. The woman Michael was cheating with was a bar staff named Olivia. I gathered this from their message exchanges. However, Olivia seemed to be unaware of the affair. Why? Because she believed Michael was single. Michael had hidden the fact that he had a wife and child. From their messages, it appeared Olivia contacted him for business purposes, but Michael was under the impression that spending money would escalate their relationship. Most likely, young Olivia was blinded by the money. Believing Michael was single, she repeatedly met him. I decided it was impossible to continue living with Michael. Before I started tailing him, I had explained the situation to my parents and asked them to help me move out today. They were furious at Michael and readily agreed to support me. Ethan, what do you think about us living at Grandma's place starting today? Sure, sounds good. Ethan was so engrossed in his game, I wasn't even sure he was listening to me. I realized I would have to explain things to him properly. Welcome back. What a rough day for you. We've moved your stuff into your room. Upon arriving at my parents' house, my in-laws welcomed us with warm smiles. Ethan, we made hamburgers for dinner. Yay! I love Grandma's hamburgers! Ethan seemed delighted at the prospect of his favorite food, which put my mind at ease. We used to visit my parents' house frequently, since it was close to our home. Ethan, being fond of his grandparents, didn't object to suddenly moving in. Our room was filled with countless boxes. Actually, ever since I realized Michael's infidelity, I had been gradually packing our belongings. Knowing that Michael was going to see Olivia that day, I hired movers to transport everything. Despite my initial apprehensions, the move was successful. I realized I would never return to that house again. As I was unpacking, I received a call from Michael. Emily, what's happening? He sounded panicked. Yes, what's the matter? So I got a call from my parents, and when I rushed to their house, Ethan wasn't there. It seems you might be under some misunderstanding. Oh, so it's a misunderstanding? Yes, it is. Even my parents are confused. They even scolded me. Interesting. Then, when I came home, all your and Ethan's stuff was gone. What's going on? It's exactly what it looks like. I can't live with you anymore. There's nothing more to discuss. Goodbye. I tried to maintain my composure as I hung up. It was too late for any explanations. Despite numerous attempts by Michael to contact me after that, I ignored him. Ethan, there's something we need to talk about. I knew I had to talk to Ethan properly about this. Daddy was friendly with another woman? You heard that? I knew that hearing this would be quite shocking for him. While I was trying to find the right words to comfort him, Ethan's reaction was surprisingly calm. I heard it. I don't want a dad like that. It's more fun being with Grandma and Grandpa. Ethan's feelings towards his father had already vanished. I consulted a lawyer about the next steps. Since I had substantial evidence, it seemed that pursuing a favorable divorce wouldn't be a problem. I had been obtaining evidence of the affair directly from Olivia. So, you're having an affair with my husband, aren't you? I'm sorry. He offered me money and But I didn't intend to have an affair. He said he wasn't married. I believe you. If you provide evidence of the affair, I won't claim compensation from you in the divorce proceedings. What will you do? All right, I'll tell you everything. Tearfully, Olivia spilled the beans. She must have been trying too hard to earn a living. Meeting customers outside the club was a breach of its rules. I promised Olivia that I wouldn't reveal her actions to the club, and in return she gave me information about Michael. Michael had been involved with Olivia for 5 years, starting when Ethan was born. The affair had lasted a long time, and thus the compensation amount in the divorce proceedings was significant. Afterward, I won a substantial settlement and child support in the divorce. As for Michael, he was abandoned by his family and the woman he had been smitten with stopped contacting him. Moreover, after paying the settlement, he was left penniless. His work was also negatively affected because news of his affair somehow leaked. He lost the trust of his favored clients and his income plummeted. He's now working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. Whether worn out from his life of loss, he asked his parents-in-law for help, but they refused to hear him out, practically cutting ties. I hope he reflects on his actions and tries harder. Ethan and I decided to continue living at my parents' home. Ethan seemed more lively after we moved in, and we're able to live comfortably. He's still attending the same preschool, so the only change for Ethan was the house we're living in. I was relieved that he didn't seem particularly stressed. Seeing Ethan's happy smile, I became certain that deciding to divorce was the right choice.
I'm heading out today, so please take care of the house. Here's the key. I was sick of my mother-in-law Megan's habit of dumping household chores on me like this. I asked my husband Richard to speak to Megan about it, but she managed to win over my father-in-law Brian with her crocodile tears, making the family accept that it's okay to pile chores on me. And you still haven't cleaned the bathroom. I wanted to shower before Brian gets back. Hey, I'm tired. Give me a massage. She started treating me like a housekeeper. While massaging Megan, I realized something. That's when I started planning to kick her out. I'm Christina, 24 years old. I've been a housewife since marrying Richard 2 years ago. I always dreamed of this lifestyle and was quite happy with it. Richard, whom I met in a college club, was surprisingly mature and cool for his age. He was initially quiet but turned out to be just shy. After a few group hangouts, he started talking to me. We found a lot in common, from hobbies to food preferences, and quickly became friends. Before long, we were hanging out alone more often than with our friends. He promised to me on my birthday in our junior year of college. We were dining in a somewhat fancy restaurant when I mentioned, I'm 21 now, I should start thinking about a job. Richard's proposal was, why don't you work for me? Knowing my dream was to be a housewife, Richard promised to work hard so that my dream would come true. We got engaged in college, but living together would wait until after graduation. That was the condition set by my parents. We used our savings from part-time jobs along with money our parents had set aside for our wedding. We decided not to rely on our parents for our new life, so we rented a small apartment we could afford on Richard's starting salary. The apartment was small and a bit far from the station, but married life was fun. Preparing breakfast and sandwiches for Richard, welcoming him home, having dinner, and sleeping together in our small bed were all enjoyable. Still, at that time, I wished for a slightly better life. Looking back, maybe we were happier living just the two of us. Everything fell apart 6 months ago. Richard's parents lived in New Orleans due to his father Brian's job, while Richard, my parents, and I lived in Boston. Brian got transferred back to Boston and they suggested buying a 2-family home. Thinking, parents-in-law were in their 50s, healthy, and had no chronic illnesses. I accepted the offer thinking it wouldn't affect our lifestyle much. Living in a 2-family home will be much better than directly sharing a space, I thought, and welcomed the idea. Brian had a well-paying job, so money wasn't an issue. Brian took care of most of the mortgage payments. For Richard, it was just like paying the rent we had always paid. So we were delighted to move into a bigger, detached house without changing our budget. We hadn't spent much time with Richard's parents, who always lived in New Orleans. We only met them at family gatherings or weddings. Despite this, we had high hopes, thinking, they're Richard's parents, they must be good people. Little did we know about Megan's challenging personality. We renovated a pre-owned duplex and were able to move in about 3 months after the in-laws suggested it. We moved in mid-December. Due to the layout, the more spacious first floor went to the in-laws. We took the slightly smaller second floor with a balcony. The entrances were separate. Next to the in-laws' entrance was a staircase that led to our own entrance. The in-laws were planning to move in April of the following year. They wanted to bring some of their furniture and clothes during the holiday season before the new year. So we suggested celebrating New Year together. Brian said he was free starting the 28th, so even if they arrived on the 30th, we would have 2 days to settle in. We thought everything would be set by the night of the 31st if all 4 of us worked together, but only the stuff arrived on the 29th. The in-laws didn't show up until the evening of the 31st. Brian apologized, explaining that Megan had refused to come until the last minute. Megan saw the unopened boxes and said, "Oh, you left them like that?" We had considered unpacking but decided against it after discussing with Richard. When Richard explained, Megan lazily twirled her hair and said, "You could have unpacked." The unpackaging didn't finish that day. We had planned to dine in the spacious living room on the first floor but had to settle for our second-floor home. The in-laws seemed to enjoy the meal and they relaxed in our living room afterward. Brian kept saying, "We need to unpack," but Megan said she was super tired from the move and just lounged on our sofa watching the New Year countdown on TV. With Megan unwilling to help, the three of us went to the in-laws' side to finish unpacking. When we came back to our place to toast the new year, Megan was gone. We found her sleeping in our bedroom, still dressed. Both the living room and bedroom TVs were on, and she had helped herself to the champagne and mixed nuts I had set aside for toasting. Brian apologized, saying,
"Megan must have been really tired from the move. We did unpack right away, so please be understanding."
I knew it wasn't Brian's fault. We let him sleep in our bedroom, and Richard and I slept in the living room. The next morning, Megan was the last to wake up, and Brian. To our surprise, after getting dressed, Megan told us she was going to meet some friends in Boston and quickly left while we were still unpacking. Brian was understandably upset about this, so ironically, Richard and I ended up calming him down. Late that night, Megan came back slightly tipsy and without any explanation, went straight to our bedroom and fell asleep. Angered by this as well, Brian said he was going to sleep on the sofa at in-laws' house and stormed out. The next day, Brian left to visit an executive in Boston who had helped him in the past. Megan woke up later and also went out with friends. Somehow, Megan returned in the evening with a cheerful Brian. Richard and I had managed to finish unpacking after the in-laws left, and Brian seemed pleased with the progress. We had mostly set up the in-laws' bedroom too, so they slept there that night, allowing me to finally sleep in my own bed. The next day, the in-laws headed back to New Orleans. After seeing them off, I felt suddenly exhausted. Lying on the living room sofa, Richard apologized.
"Mom is too free-spirited. I didn't think she would be like this. Sorry for making you do all the work, Christina. But once they have moved, they'll be living separately, so we won't have to deal with this anymore."
I was frustrated with Megan, who had a habit of imposing her will on others, but I didn't complain, figuring it wouldn't matter much after the move. However, Megan's selfish behavior only escalated. When spring arrived, along with Brian's job transfer, the in-laws moved in, and again, I was expected to help unpack. About 2 months after they moved in, Megan started coming over to our house. Usually, after sending Richard off and finishing breakfast cleanup, Megan would arrive around 10 a.m., all dolled up. "Hey, I'm heading out today. Please take care of the house. Here's the key," she would say, handing me the key to her house before leaving. I reluctantly ended up doing the chores for their home too. Megan would typically return around 6 p.m., nonchalantly greet Brian, and retrieve the key from me. At first, it was just once a week, but Megan gradually increased the frequency of her visits, making me more and more responsible for their housework. One day, I told her, "I have my own chores, I can't do this anymore." Megan walked into my house, looked around, and said, "Everything's clean, isn't it? You get your chores done so quickly, Christina, you can handle ours easily," and left the key on the living room table before heading out. I decided it wasn't a good idea to bring this up directly with Brian, so I talked to Richard. After apologizing for Megan's behavior, he said,
"You can ignore Mom's demands."
"I can't just ignore them," I protested. Finally, Richard agreed to address the issue with Megan when Brian was around. They planned to talk during a meal on Brian's day off. As usual, Megan pretended to be engrossed in the TV while I was cooking. In the presence of Brian, Megan acts as if she is doing normal housework. During dinner, Richard said,
"Mom, it's okay if you go out, but don't push your housework onto Christina."
Brian immediately rebuked Megan.
"Are you really doing that? We had an agreement not to be a burden to Richard and Christina. They have their own lives too, you know?"
Then Megan burst into tears and said, "I want to help with housework too, but my back has been hurting lately. It's hard to bend over. That's why I've been asking Christina to help. I thought it would make it awkward for her if I were around, so I went out. I'm sorry, Christina." That's a blatant lie about her back hurting. Why? Because just last weekend, taking advantage of Brian being away on a business trip, Megan went out to play golf with her friends. People with bad backs don't go playing golf. But Brian, who was unaware of all this, said,
"I see. I didn't know your back was bad." Christina, could you help with the chores until she feels better? I'll of course pay you extra for it.
Brian's anger seemed to evaporate as he became concerned for Megan and turned to me for help. Richard seemed to understand as well, saying,
So that's why.
Once we were alone, back at our house next door, I told him Megan's back pain was a lie.
But Dad said he's giving us money and you have always managed. So why not? We can be a bit laid back about our own stuff. I'll even tell Dad to make sure you get paid well. So you can buy whatever you want. Just give me a little more allowance in return, he said with a smile.
Something we realized after parents-in-law moved here is that the father-son duo, Brian and Richard, are too kind-hearted. They have basic common sense and show anger when it's violated, but their kindness means they easily forgive Megan's filmsy excuses. Megan knew this, so she told convincing lies to get Brian and Richard on her side. Once Brian started giving her an allowance for housework, she began to neglect her chores even more. She used to dump chores on me when Brian was out, saying things like, "I can't move because my back hurts," or "I can't get up, my back hurts and I feel sick," pushing me to do all the housework from morning till night. Oblivious to Megan's lies, Brian would say, "Sorry, Christina," and head out. After Brian left, Megan would shower, dress up, and go out without saying a word. By this time, I had been given a duplicate key to the in-laws' house. When she returned before Brian did, she would complain about the dinner I made. "Isn't this too little? Can't you make more dishes? You're getting an allowance. Don't slack off. My dress is wrinkled. Iron it properly. The bathroom isn't clean yet. I wanted to shower before Brian comes back. Come on, give me a massage. I'm tired," she would say whenever she wanted. She really seemed to think of me as an actual housekeeper, yet when Brian returned, she would put on a facade saying, "This is delicious. Christina, your housework is more meticulous than mine," and Brian and Richard were completely oblivious to Megan's attitude. Even when I complained to Richard, all he said was,
"You can ignore unreasonable demands."
I had reached my breaking point with Megan. I thought the only way left was to secretly film Megan when Brian and Richard weren't around and show them the evidence. Just when I thought this, an unexpected opportunity arose. It was the day Brian returned from a business trip. As usual, Megan saw him off and went on a trip saying she was going sightseeing with friends. She returned earlier than Brian, as always, and told me to give her a massage because she was tired. "I'm the one who's tired after doing all the housework, not you, Megan," I thought, but saw a red mark on the back of her neck while massaging her shoulders. It looked like a hickey. At first, I thought Brian gave it to her and was impressed that he still had it in him in his 50s, but then, considering he had been on a business trip for about 5 days, I thought, could a hickey really last that long? Could Megan be having an affair? I found it hard to believe that Megan, who had lived in New Orleans her whole life, would have so many friends in Boston. That's why I hired a private investigator to look into it. Luckily, I knew Megan's daily routine, and she always went on trips when Brian was out of town for work, so following her was easy. Long story short, Megan was cheating, and she was being pretty bold about it. Within 2 weeks of hiring the investigator, I had my answer. Seeing photos and videos of Megan in compromising situations left me speechless. She was holding hands with a man her own age as they entered a hotel. The pictures even showed her passionately kissing the guy at the hotel bar. It was riskier than I had imagined. I was shaking with anger, not just because she was neglecting her housework to have an affair, but because she was betraying someone as kind as Brian. She had the audacity to betray Brian while he worked hard to provide for us. I couldn't let her get away with this. Her birthday was coming up, so I decided that would be the day to put my plan into action. "Why don't we throw Megan a surprise party?" When I proposed the idea, Brian seemed thrilled. Here's the plan. Brian would tell Megan he had to work that day and encourage her to go out for a birthday dinner with the other man. "I'll invite her out to dinner and we can surprise her at the hotel," I told Brian. Brian believed me and pretended to go to work that evening. Megan, after taking longer than usual to get ready, finally left the house saying how disappointed she was that she couldn't spend her birthday with Brian. I had the investigator tail her, and it seemed she did go to the usual hotel where she met her lover. Had she gone somewhere else, I would have had to quickly notify Brian about a change of plans, but luckily, she chose the usual place. As soon as I got word that Megan had arrived at the hotel, I headed there by taxi. We have to expose the truth to Brian before she goes into the room with that man. By the time I arrived, Brian had also sent me a message saying he was there. I knew where they were sitting from the investigator, so I told Brian we still have time before our reservation and led him to the bar. While walking to the bar, Brian was excited, asking things like,
Do you think Megan will like this gift? Do you think the surprise will go well?
It pained me to see his happiness, but I had to go through with my plan for his sake. Since I knew what Megan was wearing, I was able to identify her from behind. I chose a spot where we could clearly see her back. From there, I thought I'd be able to see Megan and the man as they moved, and sure enough, I could. About 20 minutes after sitting down with Brian, Megan, probably thinking about moving to a hotel room, wrapped her arm around the man's and started to work off in a flirty manner. I had a perfect view of Megan's profile. I glanced at Brian, wondering what if he hadn't noticed. Brian was staring, lost for words. Then after about 5 seconds of shock, Brian ran after Megan, catching her by the arm near the bar's exit. What? Megan looked stunned.
Megan, what are you doing here? Who is this guy?
Oh,
What's going on?
the surprised one was the man. Brian, demanding an explanation, told the man,
She's my wife. I need to talk to her. Sorry, but you should go home now.
and walked out of the bar, still holding Megan's arm. I quickly settled the bill for Brian and me and followed them. In the taxi back, Megan seemed to realize her situation and kept saying, It's not like that, Brian. Brian said nothing. When we got home, Brian told me.
I would like for you to go home too, Christina.
I said, okay, but concerned that kind-hearted Brian might get fooled by Megan again, I discreetly went to the in-laws' house with incriminating photos and hid to observe their living room.
What was that about?
You're misunderstanding. Megan began making excuses to an angry Brian. I went out drinking because celebrating my birthday alone was boring. I had too much to drink and the guy next to me offered to help. He said he would walk me to a taxi because I was stumbling. Brian seemed close to being fooled by Megan's smooth excuses. I couldn't keep quiet. Bursting into the living room, I yelled, Don't be fooled, Brian. Megan is having an affair and it's not the first time she's met that man. What? Christina, don't say things you don't understand. Eavesdropping is the worst. Brian, look at this. I handed Brian the evidence photos. What's this bunch of papers? Megan, who had been confident, started to panic when she realized what was handed to Brian were photos. No, I didn't do it. These pictures are fake. Megan was yelling this, but Brian was quietly looking through the photos one by one. After seeing them all, he shouted,
You're the worst, Megan. Do you even realize what you have done?
I told you. It's not me. These pictures are photoshopped. Megan argued but started to cry at Brian's words.
How could Christina Photoshop pictures of you with a guy you just met today?
I was lonely. You're always busy with work. She tried to master her usual crocodile tears. Brian just silently stared at her. Just when it seemed like Brian might fall for Megan's act again, Richard, who had just come home from work, entered the living room.
Oh, is Christina here? I came looking for her because she wasn't home. Wait, why is Mom crying?
Wordlessly, Brian handed the photos to Richard. Megan tried to snatch them back, but Richard was quicker.
What's this? As you can see, it looks like Megan has been having an affair.
It's not what it looks like. The devil made me do it, Richard. You understand, right? As Megan tried to cling to Richard, he swatted her away.
Don't touch me!
Megan collapsed in exaggerated tears. Brian then said forcefully,
Get out!
I won't. Absolutely not. Please forgive me, okay? She repeated, but Brian ignored her. Megan must have realized that saying anything more was futile. She got up weakly and started packing her things. Finally, she yelled at Brian, Fine, he listens to me and only loves me. I'm happier with him, and stormed out of the house, but it seemed she couldn't get in touch with the other man. It seems like he thought Megan was single and vanished before getting slapped with alimony for the affair. Megan returned the next day and tearfully apologized to Brian, saying, "I'm sorry." This time, it wasn't her exaggerated sobbing ad. As she left the house, she seemed genuinely remorseful. Still, Brian didn't forgive Megan. He changed the locks on their house that same day and kicked her out for good. Half a year has passed since then, and my parents-in-law have divorced. Megan was adamant about not divorcing, saying things like, "I'll fight it in court." But since she was 100% at fault, she couldn't get a lawyer to take her case seriously, so they divorced. There was no alimony claim against Megan and likewise no division of property. Since I was the one who initiated their divorce indirectly, I apologized to Brian for it. He thanked me, saying, "I'm glad you told me. I didn't know she was that kind of woman. Thanks to you, Christina, I found out." When he found out I had used a private investigator, he asked, "Do you know who the guy is?" I did. So when I told him, Brian said he met the guy. A graduate student who thought Megan was a single 40-year-old. He profusely apologized, saying he has no idea she was married. Brian chose not to demand alimony from the guy as long as he never met with Megan again. The man agreed, saying, "I had no intention of meeting her again, even if she became single." Megan, who had been living off Brian's credit card, was struggling to make ends meet after being thrown out without any division of property. She regularly showed up near our place asking Brian and Richard for forgiveness and even for money. I have also been approached a few times with Megan asking me to help them reconcile. Brian, now fed up with Megan, sold the house that was under mortgage and bought a new one elsewhere. Both Brian and Richard considered moving out but decided against it, as I had no issue with kind-hearted Brian and it would be hard for him to live alone. Since moving to the new place, Megan hasn't bothered us and we're living happily. Brian always compliments me on my housekeeping, and ever since finding out that I'm pregnant last month, both Richard and Brian have been helping out more around the house, while my first pregnancy and the upcoming birth do make me anxious. The stress-inducing Megan is gone, and with kind Richard and Brian around, I think everything will be okay.
Welcome home! The bath is ready. I'm hungry, so the bath will be after. Prepare me dinner. Sure thing. This has been the same old conversation between me and my husband for decades. My name is Karen. I'm a 59-year-old homemaker. I time the preparation of the bath and dinner to coincide with my husband's return from work. Since it's not always clear which he'll want first, I have to have both ready. "Hey, bring some tea." When he says that, I simply respond, "Sure thing," and prepare the tea. I've been living this life for nearly 40 years, so for me, it's just as usual. I got a job right out of high school, met my future husband, who was my boss at the time, and we got married. Being the youngest of 4 siblings with 3 older brothers and with my parents getting on in years, I wanted to get married early to give them some peace of mind. Plus, I was working in an office, but frankly, it wasn't a good fit. As someone with no higher education, I was worried if I could get another job. So, getting married and retiring seemed like the best option for me. When my marriage was settled, my parents were overjoyed and shed tears of happiness. Not long after my daughter was born, they moved into a nursing home, leaving me the family home. I thought my prideful husband would oppose moving into my childhood home, but he figured it was better than renting, so we renovated it and moved in. He hardly did any housework or childcare, but the fact that we raised our daughter comfortably until adulthood is thanks to him. So I thought it was only natural to devote myself to my husband, until I saw that thing. With our daughter married and moved out, it's just the 2 of us in this house now. Our daughter, who lives nearby, checks in on us often, probably out of concern. She says she plans to continue working until she has kids. In our time, it was common for women to quit their jobs when they got married, but it seems times have changed. When I told her how impressive it is that she's doing all the housework for her husband and still working as she always has, she looked puzzled. "What are you talking about? We split the housework." Her husband, having lived alone before, can clean, do laundry, and cook. I knew he was capable when it came to work, but didn't expect him to be skilled at housework too. It's quite different from Dad. She laughed as she said that. It seems that her husband, as well as her father-in-law, are good at doing housework. Indeed, a far cry from our household. It was a shock to me, who had always thought it was natural for my husband to not do housework. By the way, Mom, I have a favor to ask. Turns out, she knows someone who runs a housekeeping service and is looking for more staff to expand the business. Mom, why don't you give it a shot? When she asked that, I was taken aback. I hardly have any work experience. I've never worked a day since I got married. Considering my age, I didn't think about working now, but when I heard that many people like me were working, I became a bit interested. Alright, I'll go and listen to the details next time. My daughter said that before she left. That night, when my husband came home, I told him about my daughter's visit and the home help service job. He looked at me incredulously and said, "You can't possibly go to work." After a pause, he added, "Karen, I have a business trip the day after tomorrow, so prepare my stuff." Another business trip? You've been having quite a few recently. Can't be helped, it's part of the job. In the past few years, my husband's business trips have become more frequent. He used to never go on them, but now it seems like he's gone at least once a month. And of course, I'm the one who prepares for his trips. I was also preparing for this trip, but due to the bad weather lately, the laundry didn't dry properly. I had forgotten to add one of his spare dress shirts. This had never happened before, and I thought it might be because I was getting old. But I couldn't embarrass my husband, and I thought I might still have time. So, I called my husband, who had already left home. I called his cell phone several times and even sent an email, but there was no response. Then, I realized that he had left his cell phone at home in the bedroom. My husband, who is not very interested in cell phones, occasionally forgets it when he goes to work. He doesn't seem to have much trouble because he doesn't go out much at work, but I suppose it's a different story when he's on a business trip. In a panic, I called his office. The person who answered was one of his subordinates. When I told him that my husband had forgotten something for his business trip and I needed to contact him, he said, "Business trip? Please wait a moment," which made me wonder. Even though he's a direct subordinate, he doesn't know about his boss's business trip? As I was thinking this, I was told, "I'm sorry, he seems to have gone straight to his business trip destination without stopping by the office." I asked about my husband's business trip destination and his companion, but they said they couldn't disclose that information. I was told something about the company's confidentiality obligation, and I agreed to have them tell my husband about the forgotten item instead. After a while, I heard a car stopping outside, and the doorbell rang. It seemed that my husband had come back home because he had received a call from the office. I apologized to my husband and handed him his dress shirt and cell phone. When I saw my husband off outside, I saw a woman sitting in the driver's seat. I nodded slightly to her, but she ignored me. I watched my husband get into the car with a somewhat unpleasant feeling. My husband returned home 2 days later in the evening. As soon as he came back, he said, "Bath." But I hadn't started heating it yet. There was no notice of his return, so I had no idea when he would be back. Besides, it was earlier than his usual return time. Then my husband became grumpy and said, "Then let's eat first." So I quickly made dinner and served it. As I set the meal before my husband, I asked him, "How was your trip?" However, he barely responded. "You wouldn't understand even if I told you. You've never worked." Words that belittled me seemed to come naturally from his lips. I let out a sigh. Claiming fatigue, my husband finished his meal and went straight to the bath and then the bedroom. Remembering my daughter's conversation, I called her and said, "I want to hear more about the housekeeping service job." For the 40 years since I got married, all I did was household chores and child rearing, so even if I thought about working, I believed I wouldn't be able to do anything. But with a housekeeping job, I might be able to put the 40 years that seemed wasted to good use. With my daughter out of the house and my time alone at home increasing, I also wanted to have a bit more interaction with people, so I decided to give the housekeeping job a shot. My husband was against it, but I obtained his approval by ensuring that I wouldn't be out of the house when he's home and that I would continue to keep the house clean as usual. Once I started working, it felt refreshing to be able to earn money and receive appreciation for doing housework. My daughter used to thank me occasionally, but ever since it became just the two of us, my husband has never said a word of thanks. When he comes home, all he asks for is bath or dinner. And when he's relaxing, just tea. For the first time, I started to resent him. In the past, we used to have more conversations, but at some point, I realized deep down that I was being treated like a housemaid. Once I got used to the job, I was assigned a new client. A woman living alone, she seemed to be slightly younger than me. When I visited the woman's apartment, I felt I had seen her somewhere, but I couldn't remember. The woman left the house after giving me instructions, saying she had work to do. Her room was in chaos due to her busy schedule, so I started by tidying up. As I was cleaning, a photo caught my eye. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman who had hired me was in the photo with my husband. That's when I realized that this woman was the driver when my husband had stopped by the house because he forgot something on his business trip. I couldn't take this photo home, so for now I decided to keep it to myself. With mixed feelings, I finished my job for the day. That night, as soon as my husband came home, he said, "I have a trip tomorrow, so hurry up and prepare for it." "Another trip?" I asked, to which my husband, who seemed grumpy, said, "I can't help it, it's my job. Unlike you, who just get paid for housework, I have a tough job." Is he so determined to look down on me? My resentment towards my husband grew. On the day my husband left for his trip, I steeled myself and entered his room. I had never imagined the day would come when I would suspect my husband of infidelity. And I guess my husband thought the same, because I found evidence of his infidelity quite easily. He had the same photo that I had seen in that woman's house. Inside his drawer, there were numerous photos, and I discovered letters from his mistress. Letters that read things like, "My wife is just a housekeeper. I'm so happy when you tell me you love me." Her name was on them. It confirmed his infidelity. I hastily consulted my daughter. Luckily, it was her day off, and she said she would come immediately. When I told her everything, my daughter was even angrier than me. "What do you want to do, Mom?" she asked. For the first time, I realized I had a choice. So I told my daughter that I wanted to get a divorce. Even though all I know is housekeeping, the fact that my husband called me a mere housekeeper ignited my anger more than it brought me sadness. I was betrayed by the husband I had devoted myself to. With that in mind, I wanted to be away from him as quickly as possible. My daughter offered that if I felt that way, I could move out and live with her. But I felt guilty about involving her husband, and above all, I own this house. I didn't want to leave my husband in this house. But I thought moving out might speed up the divorce, so I started to prepare to move and rent an apartment. My daughter found a lawyer, and I seriously started to take steps toward the divorce. A week later, I consulted with the lawyer, gathered the evidence, and wrote the divorce papers. I brought it up to my husband when he came home. "I want a divorce," I said. He scoffed. "Out of the blue? What will you do after the divorce? You've barely worked a day in your life. You think you can survive on your own?" His words hurt, and holding back tears, I replied, "Even so, it's better than living with someone who's cheating on me." He laughed. "Cheating? What are you talking about? That's not cheating. She's my lover. In other words, she's the main one and you're just the housekeeper. You didn't notice for over 10 years and now you suddenly care? If you hadn't noticed, you could have lived here without a care in the world as a housekeeper. What a pity." He didn't even deny the affair. Was he really this terrible of a person? When I presented him with the divorce papers, he snatched them, filled them out without hesitation, and shoved them back at me. "I'm ready for a divorce anytime. I'll give you until tomorrow. If you're getting a divorce, leave this house," he said and went to the bathroom. The next morning, for the first time in decades, I broke my routine. I didn't prepare breakfast or lunch for my husband, nor did I wake him up. I left the house early in the morning. He usually wakes up at 7. I left before that and went to a local diner. How refreshing it was, taking breakfast in a sparsely populated diner. The scene before me was so extraordinary, it felt somewhat beautiful. After a while, my cell phone started ringing several times. It was from my husband. Not the type to text, he usually prefers to call. Chances are, if I answer, he'll just end up berating me. Ignoring him, I turned off my phone. After relaxing at the diner, I went to the local office. As soon as the office opened, I filed the divorce papers. While my husband was at work, I decided to go home and pack up my stuff. But surprisingly, my husband was still at home. "Where the hell have you been? It's your fault I'm late. I can't go to work now, so I've said I gotta go to the hospital and take the day off." Well, it's not surprising a man who's never woken up by himself can't do it now. But taking the day off work, just like that, what an idea. I didn't feel like arguing with him, so I just ignored him and started packing. "Ah, so you've decided to leave. From now on, I'll invite her over." Her must be his mistress. Is he planning to kick me out and live here with her? The moment I heard that, I reached my breaking point. "So, you've been making a fool of me all this time. I've already consulted a lawyer. Be prepared, because I will definitely claim compensation for the affair." At this, my husband just laughed. "A lawyer? I can hire a competent one anytime. You don't stand a chance." I was so frustrated being ridiculed like this, I was about to respond. Suddenly, my husband clutched his stomach and crouched down in pain. I wondered what was wrong, but it seemed like he was really in pain. For a moment, I thought of leaving him like that, but if I do, there might be repercussions against me. Seeing him in such pain, I called an ambulance. The ambulance arrived quickly. I answered their questions and watched over my husband. It was decided that he would be transported to the hospital. One of the paramedics looked at me and said, "Ma'am, you should get ready too." But I responded firmly, "I can't. We're strangers now." The paramedic looked puzzled, but perhaps sensing something, they transported my husband without me accompanying him. At that moment, my husband's face was pathetically funny. When I contacted my daughter, she agreed to go to the hospital. It seems my husband will be hospitalized for a while. I only heard that his life was not in danger, but didn't ask for more details. After all, he's a stranger to me now. It'd be a problem if I develop unwanted feelings. I told my daughter, and she understood. While continuing to pack, I found another photo of my husband with his mistress. Shockingly, it was hidden in the living room drawer. In that drawer were our wedding rings, and I couldn't tell if my husband had intentionally left it there or not. But realizing I hadn't noticed it until now, I felt something was wrong with me. At the same time, anger bubbled up within me again. I thought about leaving this house, but I wasn't going to let it end with me just walking away. My husband wasn't around, and I saw this as an opportunity to act. I moved all his belongings to a rented storage unit. Half a month later, when I started living in a new apartment and finished my work for the day, I found my phone filled with missed calls from my husband. As I was about to drop my phone in surprise, another call came through. I reluctantly pressed the answer button. "Hey, where are you right now? Why can't I get into the house?" My husband's voice echoed. It seemed he had been discharged from the hospital and had returned home. I laughed. "Congratulations on your discharge. That's no longer your home, so why don't you go to your mistress's place?" "What do you mean?" he shouted, but I didn't back down. "I sold the house. You seem to be mistaken, but the house was in my name. I can do whatever I want with my belongings, and it's none of your business. Besides, I've graduated from being your housekeeper. We're already divorced, so do whatever you please. Divorce? He must have forgotten about signing the divorce papers half a month ago, or maybe he thought I wouldn't really go through with it. He seemed bewildered, but I hung up. Later, I claimed damages through a lawyer from both my ex-husband and his mistress. My ex-husband had boasted he could easily hire a competent lawyer, but given the evidence and duration of the affair, no lawyer was willing to take a losing case. Thus, I was able to secure a significant sum of money. From what my daughter heard from my ex-husband, his affair was apparently well known within his company, which made sense considering the reactions I got when I called his workplace. In reality, he wasn't on business trips, but vacationing with his mistress. But once the divorce was finalized, my ex-husband became the butt of jokes at his office for being left by his wife and having his house sold off. Apparently, he felt quite uncomfortable. His colleagues and subordinates were heartless. Furthermore, when he went to his mistress's place and she was also asked to pay damages, she complained that this wasn't what she signed up for and left him. How could she say such a thing after getting involved with a married man? My daughter, unable to forgive her father's infidelity, cut off all contact with him afterwards, so I don't know what happened to him. Given his high pride, he might not be able to stand being laughed at work and might have quit the job. He might have moved back to his hometown, which is far away from here. I thought I was powerless, but once housework became my job, I realized the time I'd spent wasn't wasted, and now I'm living a fulfilling life.
Here you go. What my husband handed me was unmistakably divorce papers. It was so sudden that my mind couldn't catch up. The voice I managed to squeeze out was trembling noticeably. Why? We've never even mentioned divorce before. Isn't it obvious? Because you're infertile. In the end, we divorced. I was forced to take all the blame and end the relationship unwillingly. However, the tragedy of my husband was to come several years later. My name is Michelle. I'm 27 years old. I married Jake, who's the same age as me, and we're in our 3rd year of marriage. Jake and I were classmates in college, and we've been dating since then. After graduating from college, we went through the unfamiliarity of working life and eventually got married. We've always been more like best friends than a couple. It may not be as romantic as the typical couple, but this relationship where we could talk about anything with complete honesty was comfortable for me. We've had arguments at times, but our marital relationship has been good. I thought we were going to live happily forever. Until one day, in our 2nd year of marriage, Jake came home looking grumpy. Hey, Michelle, aren't you pregnant yet? Huh? Why this sudden question? My mom asked why we don't have kids yet after being married for 2 years. That again? We talked about this, that children are a gift, remember? That might be true, but it's been 2 years already, right? It's honestly stressing me out to be constantly nagged by my mom. What am I supposed to do about that? Ever since we got married, my mother-in-law has been saying that she wants to see her grandchild soon. It's nice that she's looking forward to a grandchild. And if I could, I'd love to do that for her as soon as possible. But no matter how much time passed, we just weren't being blessed with a child. From my perspective, we've only been married for 2 years, but from my mother-in-law and Jake's point of view, it's already been 2 years. Recently, every time I see my mother-in-law, I'm reminded about children, and sometimes Jake even brings it up. Pregnancy is an issue between the couple. Yet my husband and my mother-in-law would blame me as if it was my fault. Because of this, our intimate moments have decreased, and we've been arguing more than before. This can't go on. I decided to express my feelings clearly. Jake, I don't think we need to rush this. What? Why are you so casual about it? With a disgusted look, my husband responded to my words. Do I have to keep hearing the nagging from my mom forever? That's why we should tell your mom that we should leave it to nature. If she could understand that, we wouldn't be having a hard time. Just try a little harder, please. What? What does that mean? It sounded as if I wasn't trying hard enough. What does try harder mean anyway? Is it such a bad thing that we haven't been blessed after 2 years of marriage? I couldn't understand my husband's perspective, and I was about to yell at him, but I didn't want to escalate the situation. I swallowed my anger, but my husband added fuel to the fire. You know, I've been thinking for a while now. Michelle, are you infertile? What? What are you talking about? Isn't it obvious? Isn't it strange that we haven't had any children? How does that make me the problem? It could be both of us, or it could be you, Jake. What? Why me? It's usually the woman's problem when a couple can't have kids, right? What? Are you serious? His unbelievable statement left me more stunned than angry. Please stop with the stereotypes. We're only 27, you know. We're not in a hurry. But my mom says she wants to see her grandchild soon, so we can't help it. Why do we have to cater to your mom's wishes? Look, just go get a fertility test or something, okay? My husband dropped the topic one-sidedly and locked himself in his room. Left alone, tears welled up in my eyes from all the anger and sadness. What on earth? How can he say such things so casually? As if it's all my fault when this is an issue between us. He could easily tell his mother straight out. From that day, our relationship as a couple deteriorated rapidly. I did as he told and had a fertility test, but it turns out I don't have any issues. Even when I shared this, his attitude didn't change at all. If anything, he's become even colder since it was confirmed that there's no problem on my end. Even when we're called to his parents' house together, I'm the only one who gets blamed. Michelle, I heard the story from Jake. His mother yells at me, mercilessly. You apparently told Jake that you shouldn't rush into having kids yet. I've said it before, having children is a blessing. Enough! How long are you going to have this laid-back attitude? You're almost 30, aren't you? Yes, I am, but there are plenty of people who have children past 30 these days. Don't make excuses. You've been married for more than 2 years and you still don't have children. My husband didn't defend me, even when she hurled such insults at me. Moreover, his icy gaze seemed to say, It's your fault. I couldn't get through to them, and I was just constantly criticized. With all the blame being thrown at me, I felt like my heart was about to crush. And then his mother delivered the final blow. Oh, I shouldn't have approved of this marriage with an infertile woman. I'm not infertile, I wanted to retort, but the words got stuck in my throat. All that came out were tears. Even seeing me like this, my husband didn't offer any kind words, just let out a small sigh. Several days later, since then, I barely talked to him. Of course, no intimacy either. What used to be a happy life turned upside down and became like hell. On this day, as usual, I was preparing dinner in a gloomy mood, waiting for him to come home. As soon as he got home, my husband stormed towards me. Here you go. What he handed me was unmistakably divorce papers. Why? We've never even mentioned divorce before. Isn't it obvious? Because you're infertile. What? I couldn't comprehend what was happening. It was all too sudden. The voice I managed to squeeze out was trembling noticeably. Hold on, I told you, right? The tests showed that I'm not infertile. Then why can't we have kids? It doesn't make sense. If you think so, why don't you get tested, Jake? What? Why me? Isn't infertility a woman's issue? That's not necessarily true. The doctor even said that the cause could be on the male side. At that, my husband shouted, Shut up! Louder than I'd ever heard him before. Seeing his terrifying face for the first time, my shoulders trembled unintentionally. I was at a loss for words, and he calmly told me, There's no way the problem is with me. It's all your fault. But the hospital confirmed there's no issue with me. Shut up, you defective product. My mom was right to oppose our marriage. I'm embarrassed. I'm fed up with being married to a barren woman like you. How could you? Shut up and sign the divorce papers. I don't love you anymore. His cruel words made my head spin. Everything went dark before my eyes, and I no longer had the energy to retort. I filled out the divorce papers as told and signed it. When I finished, my husband coldly told me, Pack up and get up by tomorrow. What? So soon? Don't talk back. Make sure you submit the divorce papers, got it? I understand. The next day, I did as I was told and packed up my things. After leaving the apartment I had shared with my husband, I submitted the divorce papers on my way back to my parents' house. Just like that, our marriage came to an abrupt end. For a while after that, I was weighed down by the divorce. It was only possible to recover because of the support from my family. From then on, I spent my days off going out with local friends or making time for my hobbies. Doing so gradually faded the unpleasant memories of Jake, and I was steadily stepping into a new life. 2 years later, I remarried a man I met at the gym I started going to for my hobby. We were able to have a child right away. I wasn't infertile after all. There was no reason for me to be blamed. Just knowing that I could become pregnant lightened my heart. I'm glad I divorced Jake. I thought that from the bottom of my heart. Then one day, I got an invitation to a college reunion from a friend. Jake, my ex-husband, was in the same year, so I thought it would be awkward to meet him and was going to decline, but apparently he had already informed them that he wouldn't attend. I was also entering my second trimester, and I wanted to announce my marriage to my close friends, so I decided to attend the reunion. The day of the reunion finally came. I dressed up for the occasion and headed to the venue. Seeing my slightly swollen belly, my friends rushed over and showered me with congratulatory words. Michelle, congratulations! We were worried when we heard you got divorced, but you look so happy. I'm really glad you met someone nice. Congratulations. Tearing up, I thanked my friends. There I was, enclosed in this room of happiness. But that was short-lived. Wait, Michelle? A familiar voice disrupted the peaceful atmosphere. Jake was standing there. He approached me with a smug grin on his face. Long time no see. How have you been? Jake, I was told you weren't coming to the reunion today. I just happened to attend a company party nearby, so I just popped in. Oh, I see. Well, I'll be going now. As I tried to walk away, he stopped me. Hold on a minute. The next moment, he said something that made my ears burn. Hey, Michelle, you've put on some weight, haven't you? Excuse me? Whoa, you've gotten fat. I guess you won't be remarrying anyone. He looked me up and down, laughing at me in a demeaning way. In that moment, the tiny bit of feelings I had left towards him instantly turned into hate. Seeing me tremble in anger, my ex-husband mistakenly thought he'd won. Taking advantage of my silence, he started hurling insults at me. Your belly is too big. You're a terrible woman. He's the terrible human being. I firmly told Jake, this is a baby bump. I'm pregnant. At that remark, my ex-husband looked dumbfounded. He was likely unable to understand the situation, so I explained carefully. Did you hear me? This isn't fat. There's a baby inside. What? What are you saying? There's no way. Why not? Huh? Why are you so certain it's impossible? Despite my harsh tone, Jake stammered. Well, that's... As if to settle old scores, I tauntingly retorted. Are you trying to say that I am infertile? Well, that's what I thought. Isn't that why you couldn't get pregnant for so long? But here I am, remarried and expecting a child. Do you still think I'm infertile? Oh. From behind him a voice said, Excuse me. There was an unfamiliar woman standing there. Upon seeing her, my ex-husband Jake visibly flinched. Rachel, didn't I tell you to wait at the entrance? I just followed you because I was concerned. What's going on here? Oh. Jake, didn't you say that you divorced because your ex-wife was infertile? That you loved each other but thought about each other's situation and decided on a peaceful divorce? That's... From what I heard of your conversation, it doesn't seem like you had a peaceful separation at all. The two of them were descending into a scene of a television drama in front of me. It appeared that this woman named Rachel was Jake's current girlfriend. Upon noticing how I was, Rachel opened her mouth with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry for the sudden interruption. I'm Rachel. You're Michelle, right? The ex-wife? Yes, that's correct, but I heard from Jake that your infertility was the reason for your divorce, but that's not true, is it?
And the part about a peaceful divorce?
Well, that's a downright lie. After all, he arbitrarily decided that I was infertile and abruptly pushed the idea of divorce onto me. I thought so. It seemed that Rachel had been fed a convenient lie by Jake. She seemed to feel a certain degree of anger at the truth that had come from my mouth. Jake desperately began making excuses, trying to regain her trust. Even at this point, he was still just a man trying to save his own skin. No, Rachel, really, it was a peaceful divorce. That doesn't make sense, does it? Michelle said she was abruptly pushed into a divorce. But that's because she... But Michelle's pregnant now, isn't she? That's... I hope it isn't so, but you're not the cause of the infertility, are you, Jake? What? As she continued her questioning, Jake's face gradually turned pale. He probably never imagined that he might be blamed for the infertility. With that, my ex-husband Jake was totally dispirited. Still pale, he crumbled onto his knees right there. Voices of condemnation could be heard from the classmates who had witnessed the whole incident. Jake really messed up blaming his infertility on his wife. That's just nuts. Making Michelle the villain, that's low. That guy's done as a man. Besides, apparently he's a total mama's boy.
Ew, seriously? So creepy.
Unable to bear the chilly atmosphere, Jake ran off in tears. According to the rumors I heard later, Jake and Rachel ended their engagement right after that. He desperately tried to hold on to her, but it seemed Rachel wouldn't have it. Rachel couldn't forgive him, not just for lying, but for blaming me for the infertility. Although Jake was adamant that he had done nothing wrong, medical tests revealed that he was the one with fertility issues. Although it wasn't impossible for him to have a child, the verdict was nearly impossible under the current circumstances. Upon hearing the diagnosis, his mother disowned Jake in a rage, even though she adored her son. Well, she did want a grandchild so much, so it's understandable. And so their mother-son relationship reached its worst end. Both Jake and my former mother-in-law only thought about themselves, and this was the result. They brought it upon themselves, and they got what they deserved. Well, it's none of my business anymore. I couldn't care less about what fate befalls them. On the other hand, I recently gave birth to my first child without any issues. My baby is even more adorable than I imagined, and every day is filled with joy. My first pregnancy, my first time raising a child. There's a lot I don't know about, but I'm truly happy. I have nothing but gratitude for my husband, who gave me this happiness. Thank you for always being there for me. I expressed my words of gratitude to my husband, or rather, the words just slipped out of my mouth before I knew it. My husband then flashed a bright smile and said, "What are you talking about? It's only natural as a spouse, right?" "Perhaps that's true. Besides, you're the one that did all the work. Thank you for giving birth to such an adorable child," my husband told me while looking directly into my eyes. At his words, tears naturally started to fall. I'm the happiest person in the world. With a husband I love so much, and our adorable child will always be together.
You're so cold. I don't understand how he comes to this conclusion. I have no obligation to help her, and she doesn't even do what she can do for herself. He's scolding the wrong person. I'm a working woman in my 40s, living with my husband. Our daughter, who we were blessed with, is currently in her second year of middle school. I think she's grown up to be quite obedient. There are various problems in our life together, but we maintain a semblance of calm for our daughter's sake, not wanting to change her environment due to our circumstances. But even dealing with my husband alone is a burden, and he takes on additional burdens. It's the existence of my sister-in-law. Every time she has a fight with her husband, she runs to our house, and she won't leave until her husband apologizes and comes to pick her up. It was fine when their fights were resolved within the day during their newlywed days, but now, over 10 years into their marriage, my husband says things like, "Please take care of her until the weekend." It's ridiculous that she hasn't grown up, still repeating the same patterns from her younger days, even in her mid-30s. Every time my sister-in-law intrudes, our daily rhythm is disrupted, expenses pile up, and the only good thing is that she serves as a negative example for our daughter. I don't want to be an adult like that. My daughter complains to me like this. Nowadays, my sister-in-law decides to freeload at our house whenever she pleases, but she does nothing here. Absolutely nothing. She doesn't pay for the expenses she incurs or do any housework. She acts like a complete guest. What's for my lunch? She asks as if it's only natural when I'm about to leave for work. I wonder why she thinks it's natural for her meal to be prepared. I try not to shout or speak firmly. You're not a child, so prepare your own food. If you use the ingredients in the refrigerator, pay for them properly. It's a nuisance to always be fed for free. Of course, my audacious sister-in-law, who never thinks of doing anything herself, won't obediently say, "Understood." She rolls her eyes and starts yelling. What's with the attitude? I'll tell my brother. Just to be clear, she's in her mid-30s. She's married but has no children, yet she's become completely dependent on others. The person she relies on is hopeless too. When my husband receives a complaint from my sister-in-law, he says, "Why don't you just buy her some pastries or something?" So I calmly push back. "Why don't you buy them yourself, with your own allowance?" My husband grimaces and says, "You're so cold." It's just ridiculous. As I mentioned earlier, my sister-in-law doesn't help with housework, so when her stay becomes longer, she puts her dirty underwear in the laundry basket as if it's only natural. Of course, she never asked. She thinks it's only natural for me to do it and for her to have it done. I think it's only natural that I don't do it, so I say harshly, "Wash your own underwear. I'm not your mother and this isn't your house. Besides, you're an adult, or rather, a respectable middle-aged woman, so take care of yourself." My sister-in-law resists this and eventually tattles to my husband. She has no intention of resolving the issue herself. Washing her underwear with the rest isn't a big deal, right? My husband seems to want to impress his sister and say things that miss the point. It's not a matter of time and effort. The problem is that the sister-in-law is in the house, and that she and my husband think it's natural. I become annoyed and say, "Why don't you just have her wash her own underwear in the bathroom? She's not a child." When I say this dismissively, my husband replies, "You're cold-hearted." Dealing with him is truly tiresome. As if I wasn't already fed up with this husband, he brings the problematic sister-in-law into our home and tries to ruin our family. I don't understand what's so cold-hearted. I'm just stating the obvious. An adult woman who would be too embarrassed to have someone else wash her underwear. Even our daughter has started taking care of herself. She washes her own underwear because she doesn't want it mixed with her dad's. As I throw a cold stare at my husband and tell him this, he falls silent. My husband tries to scold me, but always ends up being talked down to. And since he never admonishes his sister-in-law, her attitude only gets worse. One Sunday, when my daughter was sitting on the sofa watching TV, my sister-in-law, who had once again been arguing with my husband, said roughly, "Move, you're in the way." And with that, she swung her leg and kicked my daughter's arm as if to push her away. It was probably for some trivial reason, like wanting to lie down on the sofa. Up until now, I had been letting her get away with just ignoring her. But when she not only spoke out, but used violence against my daughter, I could not forgive her. I stepped in between the two of them to protect my daughter and yelled at my sister-in-law. "What are you doing? It's already insane to barge into someone's house for trivial reasons and act like this is your own place. But to use violence against the child of that house is beyond madness. I have no obligation to let a criminal who hurts my family stay in the house. Get out right now." I had been holding back until now. I had built up a lot of resentment, not just towards my sister-in-law, but also towards my husband's actions. I exploded more than I had imagined. My sister-in-law seemed surprised by my outburst and was speechless for a while. Still, her anger gradually surfaced and she started to open her mouth. But my husband, who heard the commotion, came in and said, come on. So she sulked and sat down in a dining chair. My husband tried to calm me down, but the root cause was him pampering his sister, so there was no way I could be appeased. I thought it would be best to make it clear in front of the sister-in-law at this point. So I said with determination, "I'm not joking. I'm fed up with having our lives ruined by your sister. It's not good for our daughter's education to have someone like her in the house. Send her back to her house right away and don't let her come here again." But my foolish husband seemed to take the situation lightly and replied nonchalantly, "Don't exaggerate. If you just tell our daughter to be careful, there won't be a problem, right?" I was at my limit and said while glaring at him, "What are you talking about? I've thought this for a while, but aren't you too lenient with your sister? Is she holding some kind of leverage over you?" My husband didn't like my attitude and pushed me away, saying, "What kind of way is that to talk to your husband?" He pushes me away. I hadn't expected my husband to be violent, and he put a lot of force into it, so I couldn't withstand it. Flew back into the decorative shelf, and a heavy clock fell on my shoulder, causing intense pain. My daughter screamed and rushed to me, but my husband didn't seem to care, and said, "If you learn from this, you should reflect," and left the living room. My sister-in-law was smirking while watching the scene. I can't take it anymore. I can't expect any reasonable thoughts from my husband. It's not just about my sister-in-law. My husband can't hold down a job. When things get a little tough, he quits and looks for another job. His current job is part-time and pays less than a college graduate's starting salary. He couldn't even pay off his college loans, so I've been covering for him after making him sign a promissory note. I'm the one supporting our life now, and doing all the housework. Despite that, my husband doesn't appreciate it and has this arrogant attitude. He doesn't understand his place at all. If he can't understand it, I have to make him understand, right? I decided to divorce him and use this injury as leverage by getting a medical certificate from the hospital. I felt bad for my daughter, but when I talked to her about it, she agreed and said she would come with me after the divorce. There's no reason to hesitate now. I prepared the divorce papers and confronted my husband. He panicked and said, "Calm down, we have a daughter. We can at least wait until she's an adult, right? It's not good for her education if her parents get divorced." I yelled back at him, "It's not good for her education that you're yelling your sister's behavior. You don't even care when our daughter gets kicked. You're a failure as a father to anyone who sees it. I bought the apartment we live in, so it's in my name. I let you stay in the house until now, so why don't you go live with your sister?" I kicked him out. I don't know what happened to my husband in the end, but I sent his belongings to my sister-in-law's place since they weren't much. The divorce negotiations were prolonged because my husband resisted the amount of compensation I proposed, but eventually he gave up and agreed to the divorce when I reduced the amount. I let his debt to me go by having him give up his share of the property, but I have no intention of forgiving him or my sister-in-law for everything that's happened. I don't think he can pay it off properly, but I have to make him realize the weight of what he's done. Well, a man can manage well enough if he works hard and doesn't rely on others. I must have spoiled my husband too much up until now. That's probably why he spoiled his sister too much. I have to reflect on this too. My daughter, on the other hand, is growing up strong and steady, unlike what you'd expect from our child. I have to be grateful to my husband for at least giving me our daughter. Thank you for watching until the end.